So when Christians are feeling discouraged, they have only to think of the God in whom they trust. You take what our God is able to do. Daniel chapter 3, verse 17. Our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning, fiery furnace. Matthew chapter 3, verse 9. God is able of these stones to raise up children. Romans 4:21. What he had promised he was able to perform. Romans 14, verse 4. God is able to make him stand. 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 8. God is able to make all grace abound. Ephesians chapter 3, verse 20. Able to do exceeding abundantly above all that we can ask or think. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 12. Able to keep that which I have committed unto him. Hebrews chapter 2, verse 18. Able to succor them that are tempted. Hebrews chapter 7, verse 25. Able to save to the uttermost. Jude 24. Able to keep you from falling. And there is the terrible warning to those who reject Christ in Matthew 10:28. Able to destroy both soul and body in hell. A study of the 7 walks in Ephesians will be helpful in deciding questions that perplex some Christians. Ephesians 2:1, walk of obedience. Ephesians 5:2, walk in love. Ephesians 4:1, walk worthy of the vocation. Ephesians 5:15, walk circumspectly. Ephesians 5:8, walk as children of light. Ephesians 2:10, walk in good works. Ephesians 4:17, walk not as other Gentiles walk. Then again, I have been greatly blessed by going through the believings of John. As I said before, he wrote his gospel that we might believe. All through, it is believe, believe, believe. If you want to persuade a man that Christ is the Son of God, John is the gospel for him. Take him right into and through the Gospel of John. Matthew was a Jew, and he writes of Christ as a Jew, as the son of David coming to take his throne. He commences with Abraham, and he treats of the kingdom all the way down to Christ. Mark begins with Malachi. He begins where the Old Testament left off and speaks of Christ as a servant coming to do the will of God. Luke begins with Zacharias. He takes up the human side and speaks of him as a physician, healing the sick, making the lame to walk, and giving sight to the blind. But John brings him out of the bosom of the Father. He goes beyond Malachi, beyond Abraham, beyond Adam, away beyond the morning stars, and brings him out of the Father's bosom, and with one stroke of the pen settles the question of Unitarianism forever. John was no Unitarian. Every word he wrote was against it. He says the Son of God was manifest in the flesh. Go through John's Gospel and study the believes, the verilies, the I ams, and go through the Bible in that way, and it will become a new book to you. Someone has said that when God sent Moses down into Egypt, he gave him a blank check to be filled out with anything that he wanted. When he stood before Pharaoh, he had only to say, "The I am that I am has sent me," and the water was turned into blood. The frogs came, and finally death fell upon the firstborn in all the land. from Pharaoh that sat upon his throne, unto the maidservant that is behind the mill. In the wilderness he wanted water, and God gave it, and bread was sent from heaven at Moses' call. The I Ams of John's Gospel give us our food, show us our way, and carry us right up to where our risen Lord is. John 6:35, I am the bread of life. John 8:12, I am the light of the world. John 8:58, before Abraham was, I am. John 10:7, I am the door. John 10:11, I am the good shepherd. John 11:25, I am the resurrection and the life. John 14:6, I am the way. John 17:24, be with me where I am. I have recently gotten 7 points in Christian attainment. Psalms 23:2, lying down, at rest. Luke 14:39, sitting, to lean. Ephesians 6:13 and 14, standing, on the defensive. Isaiah XL 31, walking on God's errand. Hebrews 2:1, running, eager to do God's will. Psalms 18:21, leaping, overcome difficulties. Isaiah XL 31, mounting up on wings, rising above the world. Another plan, and a good one too, is when a preacher gives out a text, just take and mark it, and as he goes on preaching, make marginal notes. A few words in the margin, keywords, that shall bring back the whole sermon again. By this plan of making a few marginal notes, I can remember sermons I heard years and years ago. Every man ought to take down some of the preacher's words and ideas, and then go into some lane or alley and preach them out again to others. We ought to have 4 ears, 2 for ourselves and 2 for other people. Then if you are in a new town and have nothing else to say, jump up and say, I heard someone say so-and-so. They will always be glad to hear you if you give them heavenly food. The world is perishing for lack of it. Some 8 years ago, I heard an Englishman in Chicago preach from a curious text. Proverbs 30, verse 24. There be 4 things which are little upon the earth, but they are exceeding wise. Well, I said to myself, what will you make of these little things? I have seen them a good many times. Then he went on reading. The ants are a people not strong, yet they prepare their meat in the summer. He said God's people were like the ants. Well, I said, I have seen a good many of them, but I never saw one like me. They were like the ants, he said, because they were laying up treasure in heaven and preparing for the future. But the world rushed madly on and forgot all about God's command to lay up for ourselves incorruptible treasures. The conies are but a feeble folk, yet make they their houses in the rocks. He says the conies were very weak things. If you were to throw a stick at one of them, you would kill it. But they were very wise, for they built their houses in the rocks, and where they are out of harm's way. And God's people are very wise, although very feeble, for they built on the rock of ages, and the rock was Christ. Well, I said, I am certainly like the conies. Then came the next verse. The locusts have no king, yet go they forth all of them in bands. And I wondered what he was going to make of that. Now God's people, he said, had no king down here. The world said, Caesar is our king, but he was not our king. Our king was the Lord of hosts. The locusts went out by bands. So did God's people. Here was a Presbyterian band, here an Episcopalian band, here a Methodist band, and so on. But by and by the great king would come and catch up all those separate bands, and they would all be one, having one fold and one shepherd. And when I heard that explanation, I said, I want to be like the locusts. I have got so sick, my friends, of this miserable denominationalism. I wish it could all be swept away. Well, he went on again. The spider taketh hold with her hands, and is in the king's palaces. Well, when he got to the spider, I said, I don't like that at all, and don't like the idea of being compared to a spider. But he said if you went into a king's palace, there you might see the spider hanging on his gossamer web and looking down with scorn and contempt on the gilded saloon. He was laying hold of things above, and so every child of God ought to be like a spider and lay hold of the unseen things of God. And so, he said, you see, my brethren, we who are God's people are like the ants, the conies, the locust, and the spider, little things, but exceedingly wise. I just put that down, and the recollection of it does me as much good now as when I first heard it. I have carried this Bible with me a good many years. It is worth more to me than all the Bibles in this place. And I will tell you why. Because I have so many passages marked in it, and if I am called upon to speak at any time, I am ready. I have these little words in the margin, and they are a sermon to me. Whether I speak about faith, hope, charity, assurance, or any subject whatever, it all comes back to me. And however unexpectedly I am called upon to preach, I am always ready. Every child of God ought to be like a soldier and always hold himself in readiness. But we can't be ready if we don't study the Bible. So whenever you hear a good thing, just put it down. Because if it's good for you, it will be good for somebody else. And we should pass the coin of heaven round just as you do the current money of the land. In 1872, an Englishman said to me, Moody, did you ever notice this? That Job is the key to the whole Bible. If you understand Job, you will understand the entire Bible. No, I said, I don't understand that. Job, the key to the whole Bible? How do you make that out? He said, I divide Job into 7 heads. You know, ministers generally have a great many heads to their sermons. The first head is, a perfect man untried. That's what God said about Job. That's Adam and Eden. He was perfect when God put him there. The second head is, tried by adversity. And Job fell as Adam fell in Eden. The third head is, the wisdom of the world. The world tries to restore Job. The 3 wise men came to help Job. That was the wisdom of the world centered in those 3 men. You cannot, said he, find any such eloquent language or wisdom anywhere in any part of the world as these 3 men had. But they did not know anything about grace, and could not therefore help Job. And that's just what men are trying to do now. And the result is they fail. Take the scientific men of our day who talk against the Bible. Have they made the world any better? The wisdom of man never made man any better. These 3 men did not help Job, but they made him worse. Someone has said the first man took him and gave him a good pull, and then the second and third did the same. And the 3 of them had 3 good pulls at Job. And then, flat down they fell. A good many men fall when they get into an argument. Very unprofitable things these arguments are. Job could stand anything better than those 3 men. He could even have stood a scolding wife better than his 3 friends. Then, in the 4th place, said he, in comes the day's man. That is Christ. Then in the 5th place, God speaks. And in the 6th, Job learns his lesson. I have heard of thee by the hearing of the ear, but now mine eye seeth thee. Wherefore I abhor myself, and repent in dust and ashes. And down he went in the dust. He had learnt his lesson. And the 7th head is this, that God restores him. Thank God, my friends, it is so with us. And our last state is better than our first. I would rather be a resurrected man with Christ than be Adam in Eden without Christ. Adam might have been in Eden 10,000 years, and then the devil might have come in and he might have fallen. But now Satan cannot get at us, so that we are better off than Adam was in Eden. God came down and gave man an earthly kingdom, and Satan came and said, I will mar the work of God and destroy it. But God came down again and said, I will lift up Adam and all his sons higher, even unto the heavens, and will break the power of Satan. And God kept his promise when he gave his Son to die for us. A friend of mine said to me, Look here, Moody, God gave to Job double of everything. He would not even admit that Job had lost his children. He had taken them all to heaven, and he gave him 10 more. So Job had 10 in heaven and 10 on earth, a good family. So when our children are taken from us, they are not lost to us, but merely gone before. In conclusion, I would advise all young converts to keep in the company as much as they can of more experienced Christians. I like to keep in the society of those who know more than I do, and I never lose a chance of getting all I can out of them. Study the Bible carefully and prayerfully. Ask of others what this passage means and what that passage means. And when you have become practically acquainted with the great truths it contains, you will have less to fear from the world, the flesh, and the devil. D.L. Moody.